Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. And boy, have we got a packed, punchy show today. Starting off with one of the country's top lawyers, Daniel Jana KC, who he and a group of other lawyers have written to the Metropolitan Commission to say, why don't you use the powers you've got and curtail the number of people on that million march protest on Remembrance Day. They've done it under the umbrella of campaigning against anti-Semitism.
We've got another controversial one for you too. Nick Timothy, the Telegraph columnist and Conservative candidate at the general election, wrote a piece this week saying that we should ban the burka. What do you think about that? That is going to be our big debate of the day.
And meat, do you enjoy, I don't know, steak and chips, burger and chips?
Yeah,
well, you know
all
what? All of the above. In fact, you also like pie and chips as well.
Absolutely.
Right, well, now, to put us off meat, some wisecrackers come up with the idea we're going to put health warnings on meat like we do on cigarette packets. Is that just bonkers or what? What do you think?
Yes, well, it would certainly affect my life if those...
Certainly would. You'd be a misery to live with if you couldn't have those things.
Yeah. Anyway, how serious is the Gaza-Israel situation for Keir Starmer? He's got quite a few of his front benchers who have deviated from his policy on opposing a ceasefire. He's also had some councillors calling on him to stand down for his policy. We'll be discussing that with broadcasting legend and GB News favourite, Alistair Stewart. And I'm sure you've got lots of strong opinions about all of those subjects.
Like us.
So, yeah, exactly.
Like us.
So please let us know what you think about all of these things. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we get started on all of that, here's the news headlines with the fantastic Sophia.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says plans by some groups to protest during Remembrance commemorations are provocative and disrespectful. In a statement, Rishi Sunak said the right to remember in peace and dignity must be protected. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer echoed the comments, saying he supports the police in whatever action is needed. It comes after reports of plans by demonstrators to march during Remembrance events, calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. 5 people have been arrested during a pro-Palestinian sit-in at London's King's Cross station after the demonstration was banned. Transport Secretary Mark Harper says he had given an order to allow police to stop the demonstration on Friday evening. The Transport Police said 5 people were later arrested for failing to comply with the notice. One video posted on social media appears to show a man draped in a Palestinian flag being carried away. At least 15 people have been killed and 60 wounded in an Israeli airstrike on an ambulance convoy in Gaza. That's according to the Hamas-led Health Ministry. Israel's military said it struck an ambulance it claimed was being used by Hamas militants. It said Hamas fighters were killed in the strike and accused the group of transferring militants and weapons in ambulances. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Red Crescent has condemned the strikes, saying it amounts to a war crime. It released a statement saying the leading ambulance belonging to the Gaza Health Ministry was struck before one of its own ambulances was hit, killing several civilians and injuring dozens more. A UN official warns that there is no place that is safe in Gaza right now as the conflict continues. UN Refugee Agency Director Tom White said there's little the organisation can do to protect Gazans trying to shelter as Israel continues its ground offensive. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected calls from the US Secretary of State for a humanitarian pause until all the 240 hostages taken by Hamas are freed. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is meeting with the Middle East Foreign Minister in Jordan, and they're calling for a ceasefire. 88 British nationals are on the list to leave Gaza through the Rafah crossing today. It comes as Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, says his family have been able to leave Gaza through the crossing. Palestinian officials say more than 700 foreign nationals have crossed in the past 2 days, including dozens of critically injured people. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly welcomed the positive news after nearly 100 British citizens were on the list to leave yesterday. GB News reporter Mark White says the situation in Gaza is horrific.
112 are on the UK list today, including 88 British nationals, so we'll see how many of those make it to the border. And we know that, according to the UK Foreign Office, that around 200 British nationals are the number that have made contact with them, that are in the region and presumably who want to get out of Gaza. You couldn't imagine that anybody would want to stay, given the absolute horrific nature of what is unfolding in the Strip at the moment.
Over 200 flood alerts remain in place across the country after the destruction of Storm Ciarán. There's a yellow weather notice for heavy rain across the south and southwest of England today, which will remain in place till midnight. Meanwhile, parts of eastern Scotland are also being warned to expect heavy rain and strong wind. Russell Brand is being sued by a film extra who claims she was sexually assaulted on a US movie set. In a civil lawsuit in the US, he's accused of sexually assaulting a woman on the set of the movie Arthur in 2010. In an affidavit, the woman claims the actor had appeared intoxicated, smelled of alcohol and was carrying a bottle of vodka on set before the assault. She says he then exposed himself to her in full view of the cast and crew. Brand has yet to respond to the lawsuit. An effigy of Sadiq Khan will go up in flames today as part of a bonfire night celebration. Eden Bridge Bonfire Society in Kent will burn a giant effigy of the London mayor in the form of a ULEZ camera to raise money for local charities. The society burns an effigy of a prominent topical celebrity every year. Former effigies include Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Harvey Weinstein, Donald Trump and Katie Hopkins. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to you.
Thanks, Sophia. Now, with controversy growing over plans for a pro-Palestine march in London on Remembrance Day next Saturday, a group of 15 KCs have written an open letter asking for the Met Police to use powers at their disposal to put controls on these protests.
The lawyers have written the letter under the banner of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, and I'm delighted to say that one of those KCs who has signed the letter, Daniel Janner, joins us now. Hello, Daniel. We're seeing weekly protests on the streets now. What do you want the police to do?
Well, good morning, Esther. Good morning, Phil. We are calling on the police to enforce existing public order laws and to clamp down on unlawful conduct that we're seeing week in, week out. We now know what to expect from these marchers. Vast numbers descend into central London. Many are openly supporting Hamas, a terrorist organisation. We hear calls for jihad. We hear calls for the destruction of the State of Israel. What else does river to the sea chant mean? We've had arrests for violence. We hear threatening words and behaviour, and what we are saying as a group is enough is enough.
Daniel, I mean, as people might say, well, you know, yes, in any large-scale protest, there's going to be some behaviour that you wouldn't like to see, but that's an exception rather than the rule. And people might say, well, look, you know, it's Remembrance Day. People fought in 2 world wars to protect our freedoms, and one of those freedoms is the right to protest, and therefore people should be free to protest if that's what they want to do.
Well, Hamas, by way of contradistinction, does not allow such freedom of expression. And of course, it's only right that there should be freedom of expression. But there needs to be a balance. And this balance is tilting the wrong way now, because the Jewish community is living in increasing fear, as are others. So what we're saying is the police need to take a grip. They need to impose restrictions. They've got the powers to do so. They can impose restrictions limiting the numbers on these demonstrations. They can alter the route, particularly important, I would say, next weekend. And they can limit the duration of these marches. So they have a balancing exercise to carry out. What we're saying is the balance has become unbalanced.
Daniel, they're arguing, particularly the Metropolitan Commissioner, that they don't have these powers. He's saying there's loopholes, they can't do some of these things you're asking to do. Do you think they just need to be a bit bolder? Do you think they're ducking their responsibility, finding loopholes that aren't there?
I couldn't have expressed it better than you there, Esther. I mean, they do have the powers. They have the powers to impose restrictions under sections 12 and 14 of the Public Order Act 1986. They can carry out arrests under section 5 of the Public Order Act 1986. They can enforce the terrorism legislation. So they do have the powers. What we're saying is there's been a marked lack of enforcement of these widespread powers which they have.
Daniel Janner, KC, thank you so much indeed for joining us this morning and explaining your position on these protests. We appreciate it.
Joining us now is our star panel to do the papers this morning. That's broadcaster and journalist Mike Parry and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lazar. Great to have you here with us. I also see front page of the Telegraph there, Gary Lineker wading in on what he thinks about the marches as well. Never likes to be off Twitter for a moment, does he? No, absolutely. Let's wade in there.
Sometimes silence is golden.
Yes. Doesn't matter what the Prime Minister said, the Home Secretary said, anybody else, but he'll wade in.
As will Carol Vorderman, of course.
Oh, she'll be next.
I don't want to be a red rag.
But he's been very quiet on it so far, hasn't he? I've been waiting for Gary to, you know, come out and say something. Now he's decided to get stuck into the march, and you know, I think it's quite fatuous when he says, "Oh, if people are campaigning to stop more babies being killed, how can that be called a hate march?" How simplistic is that when we know that the complexion of any march which is supporting Palestine and Palestinians is tinged with hatred, with other groups joining that march, as they always do, and that's what's going to happen. Gary drives me mad. He was a player for my club, Everton. He scored 40 games in one season. But I just think it's virtue signalling. I think he's amongst a group of people in this country who, when they get successful and when they get rich, they suddenly think, I'd like to be more like an ordinary person, so I know what I'll do. I'm going to demonstrate just how kind I am. I'm going to demonstrate how considerate I am. I'm going to demonstrate what a social conscience I've got. And I just see it as virtue signalling, honestly. I really do. But, you know, he's entitled to his views, and good luck to him.
Matthew, what's your big story of the day?
I mean, I agree with Mike there, absolutely. I think it's a nightmare if on the whole of the Israel-Palestine conflict it becomes like choosing a football team, choosing a tribe, and reducing it to simplistic slogans is not good. But my pick is a story in the Telegraph, which is that Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is vowing that he will cap the increase in public spending to just 1% per year, not just for the next couple of years, but he's going to announce in his autumn statement in a couple of weeks that he wants to do this for the next decade. Now, this is... He's seeing it, and his spin team are spinning this as a challenge to Labour. They say they're going to... they're using the phrase secret tax bombshell. Some of us are old enough to remember the 92 election campaign where some credited the Saatchi and Saatchi posters which said Labour's tax bombshell about Neil Kinnock's tax plans for securing John Major a slim victory. So it seems to me that they're trying to hope history repeats itself, but it may be a challenge to Labour by capping at 1%, but is increasing public spending at all enough for those Tory backbenchers calling for tax cuts?
I mean, what do you think about this? I mean, surely, we're still spending more than the government's still spending more than it's getting in. We've got the highest tax burden in history, so surely the government needs to rein in its spending. Surely that's common sense, isn't it?
Well, I think some of it's common. I think that basically history never repeats itself directly, and I think it's rather simplistic thinking the same tactics can work in terms of setting this up as a political fall trap for Labour. I mean, I think, you know, the truth of the matter is that it's not going to... that Rachel Reeves, if she becomes Chancellor, is going to have... there ain't going to be any money left to echo the famous note that Labour left behind when it left power in 2010. So I think, yes, I mean, it's not going to be a tax and spend time. And the other thing is, do you remember when the Tories were all about the deficit? The 2010 election, 2015 election, when it was all about the deficit, and now we don't hear much about the deficit. So, yeah, you're right. That's a question both for Reeves, but also for Hunt still.
Yeah, I thought more controversial when I read was what Clark said. Ken Clark. It looked like Ken Clark backed Rachel Reeves. So I thought I'd better read this story, see what it said. It wasn't. It was quite distorted.
Yes,
it was on the
it's overblown, isn't it?
It said, "Are you impressed by Reeves?" And he was polite. He said yes. And then he said, right hot on the heels, "It's her party that worries me." But they never put that. That's quotes for you out of context. But I was curious what Ken Clark was saying.
Indeed, Ken Clark can be a maverick, can't he? He doesn't really care about anybody else except himself. The only thing I'd say about this Rachel Reeves situation is that we all know...
Plagiarism is what you'd say with a book.
You a controversial one.
You would indeed. Lift a bit here, lift a bit there. You know,
Wikipedia.
It's
Wikipedia, as we call it.
Wikipedia.
It's less time-consuming than having to write it yourself. But the point I always try to get over to people is that in a Tory government, the Chancellor is a pivotal member of the Cabinet. But surely it's true, isn't it, that in a Labour government, a great deal of the finance going into the party is not controlled by the Cabinet, it's controlled by trade unions, who are huge donors to the party, and those trade unions themselves will have a terrific influence on Labour Party policy, which Rachel Reeves will not really be able to hit back against.
Hang on,
I think Rachel will... I mean, you're right, obviously the trade unions do give a lot of money to the party, but actually at the moment they're being eclipsed by individuals as well, and by small donations. And also
the trade unions are saying we're not going to give you money at the moment because you're not doing what
so already
we want.
They're taking that money, some of the money away.
But with Angela Rayner all getting very vocal at both the TUC conference, Labour Party conference, illustrating that she's going to mobilise the working people of this country, wrap us up all in red tape, that's going to cost billions and billions of pounds.
Fair rights for workers, Mike. Fair rights for workers.
No, but she wants more than fair rights to the workers. She wants to abandon rules that make it more difficult for lightning strikes.
She needs to be worried as well with George Galloway bringing back his Workers' Party, hasn't it?
I mean, that is
Gorgeous George strikes again. Right, OK, I want to tell you about this story from the West End. Just Stop Oil protests cost theatre at least 80k in refunds. Now, this is the first concrete evidence we've had that, you know, a lot of people say, oh, Just Stop Oil protests as well. They're good-hearted, you know, and they're nice, kindly, middle-class people. They're damaging businesses. Businesses could close down. This was all revealed in a preliminary court case. 4 of the 5 defendants have been banned from entering London Borough's Westminster. These are the guys who sprayed orange paint and dust around on the stage. As a result, one theatre has had to pay £80,000 in refunds after these people allegedly, because there's a court case going on, stormed a performance at Les Miserables.
So that's just one...
That's one theatre, £80,000.
Think about all of the other havoc they caused by people just not being able to get there. Or worse, I've got friends say, well, I don't know whether to come into London because of all of the
they are badly damaging the economy of the country and of London in particular. The late, great Bill Kenwright was one of the world's greatest theatre impresarios. I used to have lengthy discussions with Mr Kenwright about the fragility of finances in the West End of London. Theatres work on tiny, small margins, you know what I mean?
Well, I love the Just Stop Oil protester who wanted their court case deferring so they could fly out to India. I thought that
exactly.
I thought that was a particularly good one.
Brilliant.
Anyway,
hypocrisy all the way.
I hope you'll forgive me here, Matthew. I'm not picking on you here, but page 26 of the Daily Mirror. I quite like this. No trim like the present. 1 in 10 people never change their hair, apparently. Did you ever change your hair?
Sometimes it goes a little bit short, a little bit longer.
Polish.
No, I noticed he's got a moustache today. He's done something.
November.
Yeah.
But Phil, I know why you're picking this story, because last time I was sitting here with you, I noticed Esther had her hair changed, and you didn't, and this is why you're trying to get your revenge here.
Actually, this is a good point, actually, Matthew, because the person sat not too far away is somebody who always changes their hair.
Yeah.
Look at that through the
super short.
That is the same person.
So I've had a perm, I've had pink hair, I've had long hair, I've had super short hair growing throughout.
Esther, they all look great. Honestly, they all look great. I had the same hairstyle when I had hair for 50 years.
You still got more than me.
Right? Because when I started the old disco beat at about the age of about 18, in those days, you parted your hair like that, and it came down here, and I kept that for the next 40 or 50 years. By the way, in those days, it was very handy, because I looked like Noel Edmonds. So I used to try and look to young ladies in discos and say, oh, hi, how are you? And give them the impression that I might have been...
I'm not sure that was it.
No.
Was that
how's your crinkly bottom?
That's a great photo of me. I sometimes, my party piece is to show this photo of me where I have hair, and I'm standing in a crowd around Tony Blair the day Tony Blair's elected leader of the Labour Party, and people can't recognise me because I have so much hair.
There you go. So, I mean, tell us do you change your hairstyle?
Or is it just as you're losing it, you change your hairstyle?
My hair's an absolute disaster. I hate my hair. I wish I didn't have any, to be honest. It's such a
Apparently it makes you look younger. When it's shorter, it makes you look younger as men age.
That's what
right?
They say, yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, that's me with my array of hairstyles. I quite like the perm.
Fantastic.
I want the perm to come back.
I like the pink, Esther. I like the pink of the
do you like the pink?
Bottom middle, yeah.
The only problem with having a perm is everybody thinks you look like Kevin Keegan, because Kevin Keegan was the first bloke who ever had a perm, if you remember.
Well, there you go. Anyway, Mike, thank you very much.
And also, talking of footballers, we'll have the lovely Harry Redknapp on later talking about football.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, coming up next, we'll be talking all things Labour and Keir Starmer's rebellion with the legendary broadcaster and GB News favourite, Alistair Stewart.
And it'll soon be time for our big debate. Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Now, it's been a turbulent week for the Labour Party and its leadership. Middlesbrough MP Andy MacDonald was suspended on Monday for his speech at a pro-Palestine rally, and there were calls for leader Sir Keir Starmer to resign over his refusal to back a ceasefire in Gaza.
Starmer supported Israel's right to defend itself and pushed for humanitarian pauses in the fighting. Yet, despite holding meetings within his party to address concerns over his position, some feel he has failed to listen sufficiently. We're joined now by legendary news presenter at ITN and GB News, Alistair Stewart. During his tenure as NUS president, Alistair, I think, dealt with some similar problematic supporters. Alistair, how does this compare to your time back then?
Well, one of the problems we had in those days, and always amuses me to remember that Charles Clarke, who went on to be chairman of the Labour Party and Home Secretary and the rest of it, and John Reid were on the NUS executive as well. It was about Northern Ireland, and we had a number of people on the hard left who supported the provisional IRA. And they're the kind of people who Robert Halfon was referring to in education questions the other day as the useful idiots, i.e. they're trying to do the right thing to support civil liberties in Northern Ireland, but they end up supporting a bunch of terrorists. And you'll remember at the time as well, there were pictures of Ken Livingstone, the then mayor of London, and Jeremy Corbyn with IRA supporters. And one of the student leaders at the time turned out to be an active member of the provisional IRA. So useful idiots can be seriously dangerous. And it's an acid test for a party leader, a man who would be prime minister, to get a grip on it. When it's a bunch of undergraduates, that's one thing. When it's councillors that can be counted in their tens and backbenchers and a handful of frontbenchers as well, then I think that Sir Keir Starmer has a very serious problem.
Do you think this is... I was going to say David Blunkett said, didn't he, last week, that these people are just trying to make themselves better and they need to grow up, very much along the lines of what you're saying there, Alistair.
Well, I've not the first time I've agreed with David Blunkett, who's a very perceptive man, and I knew and worked with him quite a bit when he was the Home Secretary. I think it is dangerous, and that's what Halfon meant when he talked about useful idiots. They're not just silly children. We used to joke in the NUS days about the trots were, boys and girls whose mummies and daddies either didn't love them quite enough or didn't discipline them properly. If you are pro-Palestinian, that is one thing. If you are in favour of saving lives on all sides, you'd be hard-pressed to find many people who wouldn't agree with that. But if it means that the entire settlement of the 1940s is questioned and you want restoration of Palestine and Palestinian rights, it can only be at the expense of Israel, because there isn't another chunk of land hanging around somewhere on one of my atlases that can be brought in and helped out. That's why people like Sunak and Blinken from the United States of America are trying to reinvigorate the two-state solution, i.e. Palestinians do have their rights and they need to be protected, but so too do Jews and so too does Israel. There's another thing about the hard left which is always worth watching, and it often takes them into great difficulties. And it's that old thing that whoever America likes, the hard left don't like, and whoever America doesn't like, the hard left tend to like. And in my time as a student leader, that got the left into all sorts of problems across Africa, in South America, and in Central America. The left embracing a bunch of people who really were pretty nasty, and they're doing it again with Hamas and Hezbollah.
So, Alistair, this is obviously a big test for Keir Starmer, and there's two ways he can go about this. He can take the view that divided parties don't win elections and therefore try and adjust his position to try and keep his party together, or we could see this as sort of a Neil Kinnock moment with Militant in the 1980s, where he feels that he's got to face them down to show the moderate, sort of maybe former Tory voters that he can be trusted. Which would you advise him to do?
Kinnock, Bournemouth, that was the most brilliant speech. P45s being taken round in taxis. I remember that very well. And Derek Hatton and walking out. Do you remember Eric Heffer, who was one of the hard left backbench Tory MPs? There was also Dave Nellis, who was thrown out of the Labour Party, but Heffer wasn't thrown out of the Labour Party. And I think if he doesn't take a grip, it will be seen by many people as a sign of leadership. And whether or not you want to vote in your constituency for the Labour man or woman or the Tory or the Lib Dem or whomsoever it may be, or Galloway's back on the scene, isn't he? You know that ultimately what you're voting for is a Prime Minister and a government, and is a man who cannot control a bunch of councillors over such an important issue the sort of guy that you want representing us at the G7, at NATO, at a whole range of international meetings where you have to really exude confidence and control on behalf of every man and woman in this great country of ours, whether they voted Labour or Tory. That's what's at stake. This is what sort of Prime Minister would Sir Keir Starmer be, and on the global stage. And Davy Lammy, his shadow Foreign Secretary, has showed just how difficult that is in the last few days, getting the line wrong a couple of times.
Alistair, Stuart, fantastic seeing you. We want you back on next week and the week after.
We miss you, Alistair, but it's great to see you looking so well. Thank you.
And so fiery, and so up for it.
Great to see both of you, and it's a joy to be back. And as I've said to Angelos and Mick, our two lovely bosses, I am available whenever. It's easier to do it from here than it is to come all the way up to London because of my illness.
Well, you're booked for next week. You're booked on our show next week. We're now joined by former Labour spokesman and political commentator James Matthewson. James, what do you have to say to what Alistair was saying there?
Good morning, guys. And I mean, it's great to hear Alistair Stewart coming on those things, isn't it? Because he's so much experience, wealth of experience there, and he's absolutely right. I mean, so many of those issues that he talks about were giving me a little bit of PTSD from my time working with members of the hard left, and many of the issues that we've faced out the trade union movement and in the Labour Party, of course, under Jeremy. And, you know, that side of things and that history, you know, it wasn't that long ago, and we think about it being, you know, in the past. Things move quickly in politics, but I am really really impressed with the way Keir Starmer's managed to try and wrangle this issue and walk this tightrope, because it is a tightrope, and it's fraught with danger at all turns.
I mean, obviously, Keir Starmer, from a Conservative perspective, James, has sort of a reputation for sort of flip-flopping and changing his tune and not sticking to his guns on something. Does that make it even more important that he sticks to his guns on this issue to sort of neuter that Conservative attack?
I don't know if you guys can still hear me, but I've lost sound on this side, so I can't hear you. But I don't know if you can still hear me or not.
Well, we can certainly hear you loud and clear, James.
If he can't, you know what is interesting? Maybe we can get him back and he can answer that question. Brilliant question. I was looking at some of the numbers. This is usually what you do, spend all night looking at the numbers and crunching numbers. But I was looking at some of these seats, say Birmingham, Hodge Hill. The Muslim population, and it's covered very well in the Times today, is 82,000. So you've got a group of about 15, 20 Labour MPs who've got 80,000, 70,000 just of the Muslim vote. These will be very worried MPs, and Sir Keir Starmer probably won't be able to contain those MPs.
Well, that applies to my two neighbouring seats in Bradford West and Bradford East, both of which have got at least 50%.
I mean, that's a lot. That's like 60, 70% of a Muslim population who won't vote for them. James is now back with us. Yeah. Hopefully you can hear us, and Phil will ask his question.
Yeah, I'll try again, Jay. I was just saying that the Conservatives have sort of attacked Keir Starmer for flip-flopping on things and not sticking to his guns on issues. Does that make it really important that he sticks to his guns on this particular issue to try and neuter that Conservative attack?
I think so. I think absolutely. And you've got a lot of people watching, and you've got a lot of people listening. You've got a lot of people in Jewish communities in Britain, who were let down in 2017, who are watching very closely to see how Keir Starmer handles this. And as you say, and as Alistair Stewart pointed out, it's all about that balance, because if you want to represent people in the world stage, and this is the problem with many people on the hard left, people who are progressives like myself who want to see progressive values in government are constantly heartbroken by this idea that there's some purity to it, or if you're representing people wider or the wider spectrum of views in Britain, you're somehow betraying your core values. And understandably, that's not how government works, as Alistair Stewart pointed out.
Well, I mean, Esther was, while we were trying to get you back on, James, Esther was reading out a list of constituencies, and the very high proportion of Muslim voters in lots of those Labour constituencies, Birmingham, Hodge Hill, Bradford East and Bradford West, which are my two neighbouring seats. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable, surely, that local MPs are going to want to represent the mainstream opinion in their constituencies. I mean, presumably that's not about being on the hard left or whatever it might be. It's simply a question of reflecting the views of their constituents.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got to be very careful with that. Constituency MPs have to be able to represent their constituents, as I don't need to tell both of you guys, but this is what the leader of the party needs to be very cautious about. His voice is to be the Prime Minister. It's a very, very different role. He needs to be able to operate on the world stage with all the caution that requires. And, the constituency MPs need to be able to make their representations at a party level. All the constituencies in the Labour Party need to, the trade union movement, all of those who represent our traditions in the party. But of course, he needs to be able to take that view and take that stance that is measured, appropriate and sensible.
James Matthewson, former Labour advisor and political commentator, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us this morning and give us your insight. We appreciate it.
And it was wonderful, wasn't it, to see Alistair Stewart?
It was.
Yeah.
Looking so well. It was brilliant.
We're definitely having a
We do miss him. We do miss him. Anyway, coming up next, the war on meat. We'll be debating the new graphic warnings that could be added to meat packaging.
And another feisty debate on whether the UK should ban the burka. Don't go anywhere.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back. It's 11. I'm wishing my time away.
Don't do that.
10:39.
Don't do that at your age. I don't want to be losing any hours.
Anyway, a new study has found that cigarette-style graphic warnings could help reduce meat consumption and, they say, save the environment.
The study was conducted by Durham University scientists who took inspiration from the health warnings on cigarette packets, and the results revealed a 7 to 10% reduction in meat consumption when these rather didactic warnings were placed on meat options.
Now, it's common knowledge that processed meat is a carcinogenic, but some eco-activists want a warning label to be added to all forms of meat, with arguments ranging from animal cruelty to saving the planet or to health. So what exactly is the argument, and is it a sensible thing to do?
Well, who better to bring into this debate than former MP and farmer Neil Parish and senior PR for Peter, Sasha Camilli. So let's bring you both in, Sasha. So let's get straight to this. Should there be cigarette-style warnings on meat products?
Well, yes, absolutely. This is something that PETA and other campaigners have wanted to see happen for a long time. It's about giving people information and let them know that when they're putting meat in their shopping trolley, they are supporting an industry that is one of the leading causes behind the climate crisis and the health conditions that meat consumption could also lead to. And of course, the many, many animals who suffer a terrible life on factory farms and a horrifying death at the abattoir. And as we have seen that the warning labels on cigarettes can sometimes lead to a reduction in smoking, we sure hope that it will inspire people to choose the beans over the beef and be more conscious about what goes on their menus.
Got to bring Neil Parish in there. Neil, what you've just heard there, what do you think?
Well, I suppose, first of all, Esther, I should declare an interest. I've just come in from feeding my Ruby Red and Hereford cattle. So I'm very much a beef producer, very much produce it on grass, on permanent pasture. So they are actually doing a good job for the environment, very good meat. And I think the idea that you link this to a tobacco style, advertising is crazy because, in a balanced diet, you need some meat, and there's no doubt that certain amino acids are in meat, very difficult to replace otherwise. And so therefore, I think, good, wholesome beef and lamb produced on grass, kept permanent pasture, which is, of course, keeping carbon in the soil, all of those things linked. And I think we're getting far too simplistic over the way we're dealing with this, because meat produced in the right way is actually not only healthy for us to eat, and actually if you take, for instance, expectant mothers, very often it is quite, the medical advice is to actually have some meat. So therefore, yes, if we crazily stuffed ourselves with meat all day long, yes, it would be wrong. But I think, a good balanced diet with some great British beef produced on grass, keeping the carbon in the soil, I think is very good. And I think we're beginning to come to a crazy world, which I'd like to stop.
Neil, the point is, though, Sasha's point is that you've just put labels on there. I mean, as long as the labels have got accurate information on there, what's the problem? I mean, people can then choose to read it and take notice of it, or they can choose to ignore it, as you perhaps would encourage them to do. But as long as the information on the label is accurate, why would you object to that?
Well, I think what I object to, Philip, is the idea that you link it to I think what's working me up is a tobacco-style labelling, because you see, what I will not accept, that meat eaten, properly is actually good for you. I don't think anybody would argue smoking is. And so therefore, yes, you can give them the label as to how it's produced, where it's come from. All of that is advisable, and they can make their choice. But I just don't want meat demonized, because there is definitely a world out there. We are reducing the amount of methane gas the animals are emitting. We're doing research on all of these things. Like I said, we are using the landscape to graze, which we need those animals, both beef and lamb, to graze. So, let's take the whole thing sensibly and not make it not demonize it with tobacco-style advertising. Let's actually put on the label.
Back in here, Sasha. It is a silly comparison, isn't it? Meat is good for you. To compare it with cigarettes, what is this really about? It's about shaming people, making them feel guilty to follow a belief that somebody else like yourself has.
Well, no, not at all. It wouldn't be. It would just be about giving people all of the facts. It is a fact that meat consumption, as it stands, is a huge cause of climate issues and the crisis that is affecting the whole planet. So this is only about giving people the information, and then they can make an informed choice. And when it comes to cigarettes, actually, red processed meat is a first-grade carcinogen, which is in the same category as cigarettes. Are they equally harmful? No, but they are in the same category, and people deserve to know also what they are contributing to when it comes to health and the climate crisis. And we've had leading dietary associations across the world confirm that a vegan diet is appropriate for all stages of life. And we actually encourage people to
Let's
try
bring
it now.
Neil in there. He's shaking his head violently.
Like I say, it's not in the same category as tobacco. I'm sorry. And that, I think there's a lot of people in this country would actually agree with me. Now, have labelling by all means, but linking it to tobacco. And also, yes, you say about a vegan diet, but there is no doubt that there are good nutritionists and doctors that have actually said there have been many mothers that have not had enough protein during pregnancy. So, let's not be so pedantic about it, and let's give people the choice, and let's put proper labelling on them that labels the meat as good and healthy healthy to eat. Yes, you can make the points on carbon and you can make the points on methane gas. You can make all these points if you want to, but not the idea that it is a tobacco, because it is not. It's a good, healthy red meat, and I'll send you some for you from my farm for you to be able to taste, and you will know that it's great meat produced on grass.
Neil, don't waste it on Sasha. Send it to me and Esther. We'll actually eat it.
But talking about the carbon count, you're talking about local produce produced here in the UK. What about beans that come from abroad, avocados that come from abroad, the water that's used for that, for almonds, etc., etc., all of the milk substitutes? They can't. That's not good, Sasha.
Well, first of all, it's not only vegans eating these products. Most people consume all of those, but also it is possible to grow beans in the UK. There are companies that actually grow locally made pulses, lentils, chickpeas. So it is a possibility, and you can make more planet-friendly choices on a vegan diet. It's all about getting the information right, but science has shown us that overall, even the lowest impact meat still has a higher environmental impact than the highest plant option. So overall, the science is quite clear on most forms of meat being incredibly damaging to the environment because of greenhouse gases, because of water use, land and water pollution. So it is something that people should be aware of when they're in the supermarket.
Thank you very much indeed. You've made them aware of it, and you too, Neil Parish. Thanks for joining us. We did actually do a poll.
We did do a poll about this to say whether or not there should be health warnings on meat products. 4% said that there should be one for health reasons. 1% said there should be warnings on meat for climate reasons. 8% said there should be warnings on there for animal welfare reasons, and 87% said there should be no warnings at all. I'm slightly surprised because it depends on the animal welfare. I've always argued that halal and kosher meat should be labelled at the source of a point of sale so that people can make an informed decision about that. And I'm surprised more people didn't want to see that kind of labelling.
Well, when I guess animal welfare is a big sort of topic there, what I notice people would like to know, is this British food? Where has it come from? Is it my local supplier? What is the sort of the levels of rearing there? And they like the British one.
Anyway, Alan says this will make me more likely to eat more meat. I'm fed up with all of these do-gooder woke lefties trying to make us conform to their beliefs. So Sasha's got some work to do.
And it's always about a climate crisis, isn't it? No matter what you do, it's about a climate crisis.
Anyway, this week, columnist at The Telegraph and Tory candidate at the general election, Nick Timothy, published a new manifesto to crack down on radical Islamism in Britain.
This included proposals to ban the burka and deport foreigners spreading Islamist ideology and hate. This comes following the recent protests that have been taking place across the UK in support of Palestine in the Israeli-Gaza war.
So should the UK follow Belgium, France and Switzerland and ban the burqa?
Imam broadcaster Ajmal Masroor joins us now. So, ban the burqa. Is it time to do that in the UK?
I'm surprised you haven't asked me that question. We don't want to talk about women's clothes. I thought we have moved away from that particular discussion a long time ago. A woman chooses what she wants to wear. Yeah. You have chosen anything that you want to wear, as long as it's decent and to your taste and your liking. That's your choice. Who is a man, a candidate, or anybody else for that matter, to dictate what a woman should wear? And I think it's very unfortunate that politicians are politicizing, or at least trying their best to garner more votes by attacking Islam and becoming Islamophobic. And certainly France is not a good example. France is probably one of the most racist Islamophobic country in Europe. Many French Muslims are migrating to the UK because of the awful condition in which they live. France has got an equal society in which Black, African and migrant communities are dealt with very, very harshly and severely. And France has got one of the worst record when it comes to human rights and upholding the rights of women to dress as they like. On one hand, they don't mind women walking around in bikinis, but they have a problem with a woman, Muslim woman, wearing a clothes that she wants.
Ajmal, yes. This is a debate, not a monologue. If we can just, we've also got Ben Habib here, who's the deputy leader of Reform UK. I mean, Ajmal makes a good point, doesn't he, Ben? That in the UK, we don't want to be a country where we're starting. We have the state passing laws telling people what they can wear and what they can't wear. Surely that's not a very British British approach, is it?
I couldn't agree more that the state shouldn't be prescribing what people wear. But I think what's offensive about the burqa, if I can use the word offensive to make my point, is that it appears to those of us who are used to women having equal rights to men, who are part of a society which champions women's rights, that has spent hundreds of years equalizing the playing field, if you like, between women and men, that it's a regressive step. It's the optical and physical manifestation of the segregation of women. And I completely agree that women should be entirely at liberty to wear what they wish to wear. But clearly, in the culture which prescribes burqas for women, it's a cultural pressure that separates women from men in this way. Men aren't required to dress in this overly modest manner. And I think, you know, one of the problems we've got in this country is that through the promotion of diversity, equality, and inclusion, the promotion ostensibly of minority rights, ethnic minorities, and so on, what we've done is give cover for the effective regression in the advancement of women's position in society. And that comes on a number of fronts, not just not just wearing the burqa, but also in trans ideology, for example, which works against women.
Let's bring Ajmal back in. I mean, you said, Ajmal, at the start that, you know, women should wear what they want to wear. But actually, lots of people would argue that actually women are wearing this not because they want to wear it, but because they're being forced or they're being pressured into wearing something against their wishes. That can't be right, can it?
Where? Which country?
Here.
Oh, no, in the UK, nobody's pressurizing women to wear anything. That's what I'm talking about. I'm saying while we have our ladies wearing anything that they want, of course, Muslim women, if they want to wear a burqa or not wear a burqa, it's their choice. I on a personal level, personally me speaking, covering the face, as called niqab, I don't support it as a personal taste. I don't impose
as the only woman in this debate, can I come in here? Because I actually...
let me just finish. Let me just finish my point.
I personally used to believe in anybody could wear what they wanted, and I've always believed in freedom of choice. I think things have moved on a little bit, and it's not actually just about the choice if you want to wear something which completely conceals you. I do think about the security issues now. I do think about, you know, if you can't see who it is, well, who is it? What is going on? I do think, is this about integration? Are you integrating in society, or are you removing yourself from a sort of an English-British society? So I'm looking deeper than just a choice of clothing, and I'd like to take the debate there, Ajmal.
I'd like to come back to you on this particular point that you've raised and also complete on what I was saying. So if a woman is choosing to wear any clothes that she wants, why would we then prescribe to her whether she wants to cover her face or not? Because I'm assuming burqa here is it's the face covering we're talking. Because in some cultural contexts, such as Saudi Arabia, such as UAE, such as sub-Saharan countries in Africa, and some parts of Afghanistan, face covering is a cultural expression. And this cultural expression
Ajmal,
predates
you haven't quite
Islam,
answered the question about security and integration, so I'll bring Ben in here. Those are my points. It's not about what you want to choose to wear. It's about everybody else understanding, you know, who is it, security, integration. Ben.
But I wanted to answer that to you as well.
But I think, Esther, you make a very powerful point, particularly if I may address the cultural one first. You know, we've practiced unbridled immigration in this country, and Suella Braverman made that very brave speech in Washington, where she said that multiculturalism, frankly, wasn't working in the UK. And that's, in a sense, what you see with the burqa. You're seeing schisms in society, cultural differences being perpetuated. And as I said earlier, at the risk of repeating myself, it appears to be the manifestation of the subjugation of women's rights. And that is not what the United Kingdom is about. And what I would like the government to take more interest in is not more regulation, but actually assimilation. If we're going to have immigration at the levels that we've had it, which I think needs to stop, by the way, I think we need to roll back immigration dramatically. But if we are going to have immigration, there has to be cultural assimilation. What we can't have
Ben Habib, we're going to have to draw this debate to a close there. Ben Habib, thank you. And Ajmal Masroor, thank you very much indeed.
I think it is about integration, isn't it? It does show a lack of integration. I think that's the issue. Anyway, let us know what you think. But coming up in the next hour, we've got your top stories of the week, plus your royal, sports and showbiz latest as usual.
So you won't want to go anywhere. Join us right after this.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. We've got a feisty, fun-packed show today. Now, look, we had a GB News poll, and the majority of them who took part in the poll said they would stop those protests happening on Remembrance weekend. Well, we'll be speaking to a former Met officer to say, what are the police going to do? How can they get a grip of this situation?
There's a new book out this week about John Ryan, the former chairman of Doncaster Rovers Football Club, who guided them through their most successful period in their history. He's also in the Guinness Book of Records for being the oldest person to play in a professional football match, aged 52 at the time. He's going to be arguing that there should be more money going to lower league football from the Premier League, and we'll also be speaking to Harry Redknapp about that too.
Yeah, our friend of the show. We've also got a royal roundup. Charles and Camilla were out in Kenya there. I'm saying now, this diplomacy that they bring, I think our country needs it more than ever as they reach out across the world.
And it's the 50th anniversary of The World at War. I'm sure you all must have remembered watching that at some point, that great documentary series narrated by Laurence Olivier. I absolutely loved it. Well, we'll be speaking to a military historian about how important that documentary series really was. And we'll hear all your views on all the things we've been discussing in the last hour and everything that's coming up in the next hour. So please join in the conversation. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we get stuck into all of those things, here's the news headlines with Sophia.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says plans by some groups to protest during Remembrance commemorations are provocative and disrespectful. In a statement, Rishi Sunak said the right to remember in peace and dignity must be protected. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer echoed the comments, saying he supports the police in whatever action is needed. It comes after reports of plans by demonstrators to march during Remembrance events, calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Suella Braverman wants to restrict the use of tents by homeless people in towns and cities. The Home Secretary posted on X, "We cannot allow our streets to be taken over by rows of tents occupied by people, many from abroad, living on the streets as a lifestyle choice." Reports say the crackdown would target tents that become a nuisance, such as by blocking shop doorways, and that charities which hand out camping equipment face being fined. At least 15 people have been killed and 60 wounded in an Israeli airstrike on an ambulance convoy in Gaza. That's according to the Hamas-led health ministry. Israel's military said it struck an ambulance it claimed was being used by Hamas militants. It said Hamas fighters were killed in the strike and accused a group of transferring militants and weapons in ambulances. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Red Crescent has condemned the strikes, saying it amounts to a war crime. It released a statement saying one of its own ambulances was hit, with the strike killing several civilians and injuring dozens. A UN official warns there is no place that is safe in Gaza right now as the conflict continues. UN Refugee Agency Director Tom White said there's little the organisation can do to protect Gazans trying to shelter as Israel continues its ground offensive. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected calls from the US Secretary of State for a humanitarian pause until all 240 hostages taken by Hamas are freed. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is meeting Middle East foreign ministers in Jordan who are calling for a ceasefire. 88 British nationals are on the list to leave Gaza through the Rafah crossing today. It comes as Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, says his family have been able to leave Gaza through the crossing. Palestinian officials say more than 700 foreign nationals have crossed in the past 2 days, including dozens of critically injured people. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly welcomed the positive news after nearly 100 British citizens were on the list to leave yesterday. GB News reporter Mark White says the situation in Gaza is horrific.
112 are on the UK list today, including 88 British nationals, so we'll see how many of those make it to the border. And we know that, according to the UK Foreign Office, that around 200 British nationals are the number that have made contact with them, that are in the region and presumably who want to get out of Gaza. You couldn't imagine that anybody would want to stay, given the absolute horrific nature of what is unfolding in the Strip at the moment.
Over 200 flood alerts remain in place across the country after the destruction of Storm Ciarán. There's a yellow weather notice for heavy rain across the south and southwest of England today, which will remain in place until midnight. Meanwhile, parts of eastern Scotland are also being warned to expect heavy rain and strong wind. Russell Brand is being sued by a film extra who claims she was sexually assaulted on a US movie set. The accuser says the actor appeared intoxicated and was carrying a bottle of vodka when he approached her on the set of Arthur in 2010. She says he then exposed himself to her in full view of the cast and crew before the alleged assault. The lawsuit has been filed in New York and is the first accusation to be made against Brand in court. Brand has not yet responded to the lawsuit. And an effigy of Sadiq Khan will go up in flames today as part of Bonfire Night celebrations. Edenbridge Bonfire Society in Kent will burn a giant effigy of the London Mayor in the form of ULEZ cameras to raise money for local charities. The society burns an effigy of a prominent topical celebrity every year. Former effigies include Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Harvey Weinstein, Donald Trump and Katie Hopkins. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Sophia. Tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters are expected to march through London next weekend on Remembrance Day, calling for a ceasefire.
Rishi Sunak has stepped in after the Met Police said it would use all its powers to stop Remembrance commemorations, such as the 2-minute silence being disrupted by Gaza protests.
Rishi Sunak has asked the Home Secretary to support the Met Police in doing everything necessary to protect the sanctity of Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday.
Joining us now to discuss this is former Met Senior Investigating Officer Peter Kirkham. So, disrespectful and provocative are the words. So, should this protest, this potential protest, be stopped?
According to the law as it is at the moment, no. To stop a protest, to stop something like this, the police commissioner can go to the Home Secretary and get their approval to do so, but only if there's fears of serious disorder, serious damage and such like.
Is there not a fear of that?
I wouldn't say so. You're talking about where you've got actual intelligence.
What do you count as serious? What constitutes, a serious disruption from
the sorts of things that we've seen previously, the poll tax disorder and things like that, where there's significant damage to multiple premises, where there's serious assaults on the police.
It sort of goes against our top guest this morning, one of the KCs who, there's 15 of them written to the Met Commissioner to say, you have got the powers, and what you need to be doing is curtailing the route, the numbers of people there, the protesting that's going on. So people saying, you do have the powers. It seems to me the police don't want to do it. Is it because of the fear of the number of people who are going to be there, feel intimidated?
No, when it comes to putting conditions on a procession, a march, then the police can and probably will do that in relation to this instance. They speak with the organisers of protests and they talk to them about what they want to do, where they want to do it. If there are good grounds for saying, well, you can do it here, but you can't do it there, you can do it at this time, but not at that time, then that will be taking part as part of those discussions. And usually people agree to that. They're usually not bound to a particular time and a particular place.
If they don't, is that then, how do you deal with that? If people say, we're not going to listen to you, we're going to do what we're doing, and I know you've advised us to go here, but you know what? We don't want to do that. We're going to cause maximum...
Well, the Commissioner can put conditions on the march, and it's then an offence to breach those. But like I say, it doesn't usually reach that point. There's usually agreement about where they're going to be. You can't move a large number of people across central London just on a whim. People get told where to start. The march goes where the march goes, and so the police have got real power to stop it going where they don't want it to go with good ground by putting conditions on rather than banning the whole thing.
What people have been concerned about with, there's been virtually one of these protests every week for the last few weeks. What people seem to have been complaining about is the police not stepping in when people have been breaking the law or when they've been using chants or something that may be hate chants, or there's lots of Jewish people who say they feel afraid to go out in London while these protests are taking place. If the police haven't been stepping in when there's been smaller protests, how on earth are they going to cope if 1 million people turn up next week, bust in from all around the country, which is what the organisers are planning?
I don't think that's going to happen and catch the police by surprise. They'll have intelligence about the booking of coaches and the number of people on trains and such like. So they'll have some advance notice of that happening, if that's going to happen. And conditions can be put on immediately. They can be done at the time and confirmed in writing shortly later. So the police have got the powers to control where the procession goes. The difficulty with banning the marches, as I understand it, is that if you ban one march, you ban them all. And that would have a difficulty when it came to Remembrance Sunday.
Well, it's a very different. I mean, we've got a situation here whereby lots of Jewish people say they're afraid to go out while these.
So there is serious threat.
I mean, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen on Remembrance Sunday with the Remembrance Sunday parade, does it? I mean, really, what you're saying is that the Jewish community in London are just going to have to every Saturday accept that they're going to have to lock themselves in their houses and not go out in order to accommodate these marches, which seems to me and probably many other people as being unacceptable.
I can understand that they're afraid and that they're nervous about what's going on. But what we haven't seen is these protesters attacking Jewish premises. We haven't seen them attacking Jewish people.
Well, we have seen premises having paint thrown on. We have seen it with the scribble on it. We have had them shouting phrases that people find deeply offensive, unacceptable and threatening. I'm not sure, really, if this is being taken in the serious manner that maybe some of our viewers have thought there.
I think it is being taken seriously, but there's a difference between things that happen individually and things that the protesters do. Okay. And the right to freedom of speech is sacrosanct in this country, and quite rightly so.
Peter Kirkham, thank you for joining us this morning. Now, in our exclusive GB News People's Poll, we asked people what they think of the planned protest on Remembrance Day, right? 20% of people say they support the pro-Palestine protest during Remembrance Day weekend. That was 20%.
48% of people in the poll say they would support banning pro-Palestine protests next weekend.
30% of people say they have confidence in police managing marches across the UK. And when we asked about whether pro-Palestine marches are a threat to our values, roughly 1/3 say they are.
But they're all, I mean, that's pretty equal, isn't it? 33% say they are, 33% said they're not, and 34% said don't know. I mean, you couldn't get much more even of a poll than that.
Did you take comfort from Peter there that you thought... Yeah, well, no. That's what I thought, but I was just checking with you.
Well, that's just me. Now, to continue to look through the top stories of today, we're delighted to be joined again by broadcaster and journalist Mike Parry and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lazar. Where shall we start? Mike.
Well, let's start with the front of the Daily Mail, because it's a story that smacks you in the face. It says, sex parties and the ruthless Tory clique who secretly make and then break prime ministers. 2 MPs in the studio. I'm not interested in the making and breaking of prime ministers. But what about the sex party?
It's usually me that raises the sex stories at this particular time of the week.
I live in fear of this.
Well, what about it? Oh, well, interesting, isn't it? This is the new Nadine Dorries book, and it's like a plot. What's it called? The plot of the political assassination of Boris Johnson. And obviously, she's a huge fan. She's also a great fiction writer. And so it'll be interesting to read it. I mean, I know all of those people she's talking about. Dougie Smith, Michael Gove, Dominic Cummings, and also Dougie Smith's wife as well. But remember, Boris Johnson appointed all of them to be his advisors.
Absolutely. I'm not questioning the content of Nadine Dorries' book, but I mean...
Well, maybe you should.
Well, I can't, because I don't know the inside story, you see what I mean? But what I'm saying is, she didn't acquire the nickname Mad Nad for no reason, did she? and also, she sort of resigned as an MP after she didn't get her damehood, didn't she? But she didn't actually tell her constituents she'd actually sort of resigned all the way. But the best bit of it for me in this, to put it all into perspective, because, you know, it looks like a huge rant from Nadine Dorries, Dominic Cummings, who's not known for a sense of humour, says, yes, it's incredible what Nadine's thrown up, you know, and he's roundly mocking her, saying, I think the CIA might be involved, I think the KGB are involved, probably Mossad. He's just completely dismissed it as a load of drivel.
Well, the idea that hundreds of Tory MPs voted to remove Theresa May and voted to remove Boris Johnson because of what Dougie Smith, who most Tory MPs have probably never heard of anyway, and Dominic Cummings were saying, is just for the birds. I mean, this idea that they were in effect pulling everybody, it's just absolutely for the birds. You know, that's what
on the head. We saw that with the COVID inquiry this week, where Lee Kane, who was the head of communications, and the notorious Mr. Cummings gave evidence. As you say, Phil, he appointed them, but you know, Esther said it. They were his direct appointments, and that says something about Boris's judgment.
He was a very bad judge of horseflesh. Was Boris.
Equally, when your advisor comes to you, and this is why you have them there too, you've got to listen to good and bad news. When one's saying, you know what, it might be time to move on, it takes a lot of bottle to go to your boss and say, we're hearing bad news on the ground. It's probably better for you to go now, and actually lots of people would benefit with that
your legacy
advice.
would be...
Exactly. So,
were there any Labour Party sex parties when you were...
I wish. No, certainly not. Not in the Ed Miliband era, anyway. And I doubt in the Keir Starmer. I can't speak for the Corbyn years.
What's your story?
Well, it's actually talking about former Prime Ministers. It looks like our current Prime Minister may be looking forward to the moment when he has that tag as a former Prime Minister. I actually said this on GB News, so I spotted this first, and I had a little instinct with some of the things he's been doing over recent weeks, that Rishi Sunak is eyeing a job in Silicon Valley. Nick Clegg, we've all tried to forget Nick Clegg, but Nick Clegg, who was Deputy Prime Minister in the Tory Lib Dem coalition, leader of the Lib Dems, is now, I think, number 3 at the Facebook-owning company Meta. Some Labour people are now accusing Rishi of wanting a similar fate, expecting to leave Downing Street whenever the election comes, because he had his big AI summit at Bletchley Park, and then he sort of abandoned that this week to a rather fawning interview, a sort of North Korean-style interview. I don't think you can worry about your jobs. He's not going to be a TV presenter because he did this rather fawning interview with Elon Musk, who is himself not exactly an uncontroversial figure, and there are lots of hard questions you'd want to put to him. So he did that in London. So people are saying, does he want to be, you know, the next boss of Twitter or X, as we must call it?
What do you think, Phil? Because I'd be hugely disappointed if that were the case, because I think there's all to play for.
Can't he just be doing these things because he believes in them?
Well, has he still got his green card?
Does there always have to be an ulterior motive?
I mean, you know, I'm a cynic. I'm a cynic when it comes to everybody, not just the Tories. But I mean, he's got his house in Malibu, hasn't he?
Yeah, but I think if you're a world leader, you've got to be talking to Elon Musk. People don't quite understand how powerful Elon Musk is. Elon Musk is a man who's controlling satellites which are needed in the pursuit of Ukraine trying to fight Russia.
It's one thing having meetings with him,
making the decision. Elon Musk is the guy who started the electric car revolution. He's got levers in all sorts of pies, Elon Musk, and if you're a world leader, you've got to talk to Elon Musk because he might soon own AI.
And I agree with you that you should meet him, but whether you need to do what people are saying is a publicity stunt is another question. And I am a cynic, and Rishi's got his house in Malibu, and the weather's better in Malibu than
But
Britain.
equally, I think people were pleased that the UK took the lead in something that is going to be one of the biggest issues going forward. Phil, you've got a big issue going forward.
When you get to your sex parties, Mike, I've got some advice for you here.
Yes.
It's page 32 and 33 of the Sun today. Double-page spread. It's that important. Apparently, it's the 25th anniversary of the invention of Viagra, which apparently took place in Sandwich in Kent, and it was discovered by accident when they were trying to sort something else out. The headline is how Viagra was invented by accident in a sleepy seaside town and millions got stiffed, which I think was a terrific...
You're just putting there without comment.
A terrific headline. But in this article, which I would...
that you read live, closely,
I read word
magnifying
for word.
glass.
There's some great Viagra jokes in this article. My particular favourite is a patient goes to the pharmacist and says, does Viagra work? The pharmacist said yes. The patient says, can I get it over the counter? And the pharmacist said, you can if you take 2 of them.
It's before the watershed.
It's after 9.
I was going to say, that's a bit risque, isn't it?
Hundreds of Viagra pills have been stolen in a raid on a boot store. Police are looking for hardened criminals.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I can tell you a true story.
Put it here like that, like that. You see, that's why we're together. Well, it's his sense of humour.
Do you have a sidelining package?
It's a fantastic bombshell. I can tell you a true story about Viagra. A retired...
Not personal one, is it? Not a real, like, personal one.
No, I was always disappointed. They're known as Blueies because, of course, my team are Everton, and I want to be associated.
They could do with a bit of Viagra, couldn't they? To be honest,
stiffen their resolve.
Stiffen their resolve like that. No, a retired footballer that I know, he had a wife and a girlfriend, and he only ever used the Viagra with his girlfriend. But unfortunately, you can go wrong with Viagra, and the use of Viagra with his girlfriend didn't wear off for 6 days. And his wife had no idea he was taking it, and he had an awful problem, clothes-wise, trying to disguise the discomfort which he suffered for 6 full days. It can happen.
Well, I think that was a useful public information
I can't
announcement
top
there.
that, but just to take us back to the story, the sad thing is that it was invented in Sandwich, but then Pfizer, who were the pharmaceutical company who invented it, then closed the research plant a few years later, so that all those high-paying jobs went, and it's a big issue in that area of Kent.
Yeah, but those Viagra sales kept going
They
up
did.
and up and up.
as it
Mike,
would.
thank you very much indeed. And you, Matthew, we'll have you on very soon. Coming up, our Royal Roundup. We'll take a look at exactly what the King has been up to this week.
Plus, legendary former football manager Harry Redknapp joins us to give his take on what makes a good football club chairman, because we're going to be speaking to former Doncaster Rovers chairman John Ryan.
Yeah, all that and more in just a moment.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Hello, it's 11:24. You're watching and you're listening to GB News Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. Now, we did a debate because some people are calling for health warnings on meat products, like cigarette health warnings. And I tell you, you've written in a lot on this subject. Diane says, for goodness sake, this nonsense needs to be stopped. I eat a balanced diet and I don't eat processed food at all. My meals are all made with fresh ingredients. This climate stuff is just ridiculous. People need to cook more at home, cut obesity and save the NHS millions. Leslie says that not everybody can have one of those vegan diets. I've got Crohn's disease, so you can't. And Dougie says, if you're going to put health warnings and all kinds of climate warnings on meat, then you should be putting warnings on imported exotic veg like avocados, those beans, fruit, much, much more. You better to have locally produced food. Common sense coming in there.
The other big debate we had was about whether we should ban the burka. Duncan says, unfortunately, there was a point where the risk always outweighs religious or personal views. All face coverings should be banned, especially burkas and balaclavas. It's obvious. And we actually did a poll on whether or not the burka should be banned earlier on Twitter, and the result was 86% said yes, it should be, and 14% said no. So that was quite an overwhelming result.
It certainly was. Now, in some rather exciting news, we're delighted to say that we're joined by businessman and former chairman of Doncaster Rovers, John Ryan, in a moment. Yeah.
John has...
He's here. He's here.
John, there he is. John's partnered with the Doncaster historian Peter Tuffrey to write the new book, Doncaster Rovers, The John Ryan Years, or should it be The Glory Years, which covers his time involved with his beloved team.
John also entered the Guinness Book of Records as the oldest footballer to appear for a professional British club when he came on as a substitute in the 89th minute for Doncaster Rovers at the age of 52. I'll be asking you for that in just a second. So, John, welcome to the show. Great to have you here, Phil.
So, I mean, John, you took Doncaster Rovers from the National League to the Championship. 4 promotions. You won the Football League trophy, including a famous League One playoff final victory over Leeds United. How did you do it? What was the secret of your success?
Well, I think enthusiasm. I actually believed it could be done. No one else believed it but me, and I made 4 predictions when I became chairman. I said, I'm going to build you a new stadium, which we did. I'm going to get you back in the Football League, which we did. I'm going to get you back into the Championship, where I first watched Doncaster Rovers in the 1950s. And the last one was, I'm going to get you to a major cup final at Wembley. And we beat Leeds United to get into the Championship in front of nearly 80,000 people. What a day. And, you know, that's a great thing in football. It can reinvigorate a town, and in Doncaster's case now, a city, bring so much joy to people that have really... had a pretty rough time, because the chairman before me actually burnt the stand down, got 4 years inside for arson, and destroyed the club, and actually sent it down to non-league, where I had to pick it up. And believe me, then I had to borrow a strip from Sheffield United. I had no goalposts, nothing. And never a club was so low. But then to sort of regenerated over, really 15 years, was great. And we've now got a fabulous new stadium, the Eco Stadium, and
John,
of course 4 promotions, including 2 titles.
John, what I want to hear about, right, because you did get into that Guinness Book of Records. Just explain what happened, because you weren't just 52. I think you were 52 and 11 months. So tell us how you got into the Guinness Book.
Yeah. Well, Dave Penny was the manager. I said, look, Dave, I put a lot of money into this club, quite a lot of millions to get it up where we are. And I said, my dream as a child was to play for Doncaster Rovers. It was Kevin Keegan's dream as well, although he went on to play for Scunthorpe and Liverpool, etc. But so I said, there's a meaningless game at the end of the season. I want to play. And I said... and he said, well, I'm not that keen. But I said, well, OK, go on then. And I went on for 3 minutes. I got on, and the centre-half, Paul Barnes came off, who was the captain at that time, gave me the captain's arm, and I ran on. The centre-half came up to me, and I was always a striker, so I went up to the centre-half, and he said, He said, if you touch that effing ball, I'm going to break your leg. And I said, if you've seen my legs, they're twice the size of yours, you'll end your career. Anyway, I was on, didn't touch the ball, but the one thing I did do, we were losing 2-1, and I started to warm up. And no one wanted to be substituted for me. So we scored 3 goals in about 10 minutes. And when I did get on, we're winning 4-2.
You should have been on the subs bench every week, John.
Yeah, well, baby, but as I was driving away, Lynn was driving the car, and the centre half was there saying, have a good trip home.
Brilliant story. Now, what I just wanted to ask you about, John, is that obviously you alluded to in that story, you pumped millions of pounds of your own money into Doncaster Rovers in order to help be successful. There are billions of pounds in the Premier League of football, which doesn't ever seem to filter down to the lower league clubs. Is it time that there was a change in the football's finances so that actually more of that Premier League money went down to lower league clubs like Doncaster Rovers?
Absolutely. What happens is they give, in effect, 5% of the broadcasting, which is, I think, 150 million. So, in rough terms, Championship clubs get 5 million. League One get about 780,000. League Two get about 500,000. And it's, these clubs, you talk about big clubs. Well, there's a lot of big clubs in the EFL. Do you realise that I think 7 clubs in the Premiership in recent times have been in the 4th tier? Or lower in Luton Town's case, and what a job they've done, credit to them. But, we've had Brentford, Bournemouth, Sheffield United, Wolves, I'm trying to think who else there was. They've all been in the 4th tier, and now they're in the Wheel of Fortune has brought them to the Premier League. They should remember their friends in the lower leagues, like Doncaster Rovers and Bradford City. I mean, look at Bradford City.
John Ryan.
You've got
Thank you very much indeed. We've got to get to the news now, but you are right. You should remember your friends. You've done well. Start paying back to those other football clubs.
John Ryan, probably one of the best football club chairmen of all time, and actually, I hope lots of people buy his book. But I actually hope the chairman of Bradford City buys your book, John, because then he might be able to find out what you did and copy it at Bradford City, because we could do with some of your stardust there. To be perfectly honest, thank you so much for joining us, John. We really appreciate your time. A great story about getting into the Guinness Book of Records, wasn't it? Absolutely fantastic. Anyway, lots more to come, including our Royal Roundup, so don't go anywhere. But all of that's going to come after your latest news headlines with Sophia.
It's 11:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says plans by some groups to protest during Remembrance commemorations are provocative and disrespectful. In a statement, Rishi Sunak said the right to remember in peace and dignity must be protected. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer echoed the comments, saying he supports the police in whatever action is needed. It comes after reports of plans by demonstrators to march during Remembrance events, calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. A UN official warns that there is no place that is safe in Gaza right now as the conflict continues. UN Refugee Agency Director Tom White said there's little the organisation can do to protect Gazans trying to shelter as Israel continues its ground offensive. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected calls from the US Secretary of State for a humanitarian pause until all the 240 hostages taken by Hamas are freed. Antony Blinken is meeting Middle East foreign ministers in Jordan who are calling for a ceasefire. 88 British nationals are on the list to leave Gaza through the Rafah crossing today. It comes as Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, says his family have been able to leave Gaza through the crossing. Palestinian officials say more than 700 foreign nationals have crossed in the past 2 days, including dozens of critically injured people. Russell Brand is being sued by a film extra who claims she was sexually assaulted on the US movie set. The accuser says the actor appeared intoxicated and was carrying a bottle of vodka when he approached her on the set of Arthur in 2010. The lawsuit has been filed in New York and is the first accusation to be made against Brand in court. Brand has not yet responded to the lawsuit. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Thanks, Sophia. Still to come, we'll be talking all things royal, sports and showbiz with some of the best in the business. Yes, we'll be joined by former royal journalist legend Michael Cole. Stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back, it's 11:38. Now, half a century on, the most comprehensive series ever made about the Second World War is still being shown on TV channels around the globe.
I should know, because Philip's usually watching it. 50 years ago this week, Thames TV broadcast what has since become renowned as the greatest documentary series ever made, The World at War.
It's impossible to imagine it without Laurence Olivier's perfect narration, but maybe what's even trickier to imagine is the BBC making a documentary similar to that today. Well, I'm delighted to say we're joined now by a military historian, and it's safe to say a huge fan of the documentary series, Peter Caddick-Adams. Peter, thanks for joining us. Apart from Laurence Olivier's narration, which always gets me going, what is it to you that makes The World at War such a special documentary series?
There are all sorts of different things. For a start, it hit me at just the right time. I was 13, 14 when it finished, and a lot of my contemporaries who are professional historians and military historians today were of a similar age. So it gripped us at exactly that time and sort of became our lodestar. And sort of direction in terms of not just understanding the Second World War, but how to do history. There's a lot of oral history there. There's visual history in terms of selection of the archive footage. And as we look back from 50 years, it's lasted remarkably well. I can't think of another documentary series that would last 50 years without going out of date.
Peter, how important and influential do you think it was in shaping people in the UK's understanding of what happened in World War II?
Well, I think absolutely crucial. It came at a time when all the senior decision makers were still alive.
I think we've lost Peter a little bit there. I don't think we can hear him. Phil, I know this is one of your favourite documentaries. We're watching the footage here. And I just wonder, could we do a definitive documentary like this again? Would you have, if you were doing it now, I don't know, on Ukraine, Russia, things that are going around, would you have that definitive voice? Would you have that authoritative voice? Or would you have lots of fake news and uncertain facts?
No, well, I mean, it was the most expensive documentary ever done at the time, and I think it is. I think it's very difficult to imagine a TV company, particularly, you know, something like the BBC, doing anything like that now. But I'm sure all of our viewers have watched it. But if there's anybody out there who has not seen the series of the World War, you must watch it, because it is, in my opinion, the best documentary series ever done. I'm sorry we lost Peter there. Oh, I know he's just as enthusiastic about it as I am.
He's probably gone to watch it.
Yeah.
Well, a little earlier we spoke to former Doncaster Rovers chairman. Now, hey, we're back to have a view of what's going on at the moment. We've got our friend of the show, Harry Redknapp.
Hi there, Harry. Good of you to join us. I don't know if you heard any of our interview with John Ryan, the former chairman of Doncaster Rovers Football Club, who took them from the non-league up to the Championship with 4 promotions. I just wonder, I've got 2 questions I really want to ask. The first, I guess, is from a manager's point of view, Harry, what makes a good football chairman?
It's the most important thing, I think, when you go to a football club. You know, people said to me, don't choose the club, choose the chairman. You need somebody, obviously, who's going to support you and back you without interfering. There are chairmen around who want to pick the team and they want to interfere in who plays and who doesn't play. And a good chairman is there in the background. He's not there for the publicity or to be the big star at the local golf course where he plays or with his pals. He supports you as much as he can, and they put in as much. But it's a very changing world now. You know, the day of the John Ryans have gone. There are very, very few chairmen now that they're nearly all billionaires. To buy a football club, one of the bigger clubs now, you're not a millionaire anymore. You have to be a billionaire. And everybody now, apart from 1 or 2, are all foreign. There are very few British chairmen in the game now. We haven't got anybody not too many people with the money, unfortunately, to buy a football club. So it's very different now. And you get foreign owners in, they come in, they want to bring in a foreign manager, a sexy, big-name manager. So it's getting more difficult for the homebred managers to actually get a job.
I mean, John, Doncaster was his hometown. He was passionate about the town. He was passionate about the football club. He was a sort of a lifelong supporter, and that's why he wanted to put millions of pounds of his own money into it. One of the things that he mentioned to us is that, you know, there's all this money in the Premier League, billions and billions of pounds. It's like throwing apples into full orchards, and that more of the money should be filtered down to some of the more grassroots clubs like Doncaster Rovers. What do you, as somebody who's been a manager at the highest level in the Premier League, what do you think about that?
Absolutely.
So what's stopping it then?
Absolutely. There's not enough money. You know, there's John Ryan, he was a fantastic chairman. I've been to Doncaster many times. I know his brother is always at the games there. But there's not it's the rich look after the rich, and they don't care about the rest of really they don't. They only concentrate on their club. and it's sad. Even when you go now, even lower, when we go and look at the grassroots football, the Sunday morning football, the non-league football, the facilities are horrendous. No money is being spent on getting decent pitches, decent changing rooms, decent facilities for kids and amateur players to play on. You know, if every club gave a bit towards their local community, you know, the Premier League clubs, the difference it could make in the facilities that are needed would be incredible. But I'm afraid to say, in all honesty, I don't know if they're interested in doing that.
Harry Redknapp, as ever, friend of the show, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your time.
I'm glad Harry said that.
Yeah,
I want to know what's stopping people doing that. We need to debate on that.
Greed, I think. Anyway, another week has almost passed, so it's time to see what the Royals have been up to, and who better to join us and give us the lowdown than legendary former Royal correspondent at the BBC, Michael Cole. So, Michael, obviously the big thing this week was about the King's visit to Kenya, which seemed a massive triumph to those of us watching it from afar.
Yes, Philip. Good morning, Philip. Good morning, Esther. I can say for sure that the 4 days that the King and the Queen spent in Kenya were a great success. That was his first visit to a Commonwealth country. He's yet to go to one of his 14 overseas realms, but Kenya has a special place in royal history and in royal hearts. And it was also good to see him smiling all the time. And there we are with the Queen meeting so many people out there. And she, of course, played a major part. We saw those wonderful pictures of the elephants they went to see, which had a special place for her because her much-loved brother, Mark Shand, who died about 7 years ago, he devoted the last part of his life to conserving elephants, and she went down there, I think probably as a tribute to him, because he did great work out there. Here they are with those elephants, playing to the cameras as always, and getting away with it. And there she is feeding one of the baby elephants. I think they lined up one that was particularly docile, or thought to be docile.
Michael.
The others seem to have other ideas. Well, you know, if you start to act with elephants, watch out. You know, just mind where you're stepping, and also
Michael,
not stepping on you.
My question was going to be, Charles came to become king later on in life. You might have thought he was going to have an easy, relaxing, laid-back kind of reign. Do you think now they are our greatest sort of diplomatic weapons, and as the world is in turbulent times, we'll be deploying them right around the world? It's going to be a busy period for him.
Yeah, absolutely, because this visit was a triumph, and on December the 1st he'll be in Dubai at another climate conference. Now, of course, your colleague Liz Truss vetoed him going to the COP conference in Egypt, but the new Prime Minister has obviously relented. The King did want to go to Egypt, and he's certainly going to be going to Dubai, and he was the pathfinder on much of the stuff that we now know about climate change. He was banging that drum a long time ago, and he'll be there. And of course, here we are seeing him in Kenya, and he did good work there because he acknowledged and he expressed profound regret at what had happened during the Mau Mau emergency, which went on for 10 years. You two are not old enough to remember it, but I was young at the time, and I remember it very, very vividly. I mean, this occupied the news. Only 32 white settlers were murdered, but in horrible circumstances. Another 1,800 Africans who were loyal to the crown were murdered. But 11,000 Africans who had been supporting Mau Mau, they lost their lives. And
Michael, I think you're right. This diplomacy that only he can do really is an asset to the UK. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you on the show again soon.
Now we're delighted to have our very own sports guru, Aidan McGee, and showbiz guru, Hayley Palmer, with us in the studio, as always. Hayley, what's been catching your eye?
Wow, I want to talk about Robbie Williams because he has a new documentary that's coming out on November the 8th on Netflix. And what I think is good about this is that the director has said it's not going to be light and fluffy. It's going to be about his issues with alcohol, with drugs, mental health. So it's going to be a bit of an emotional watch. And I'm here for it.
I thought you were going to say you're here for him.
I'm here for you, Robbie. I'm
here for you, as are so many other thousands of girls around the world.
I was reading the paper today about his affair with Jerry Halliwell.
Yes, I saw that.
Is all the sordid
late
stuff?
90s?
Is all the sordid stuff going to be in the documentary?
Apparently, it's the last 30 years. He's just come in like completely open, and I think it's good. I think like that's what kind of grips.
Do you think people want to see that, the water and all? I think are we all bored of those photo shoots and looking perfect and everything perfect? Actually, he's probably ahead of the curve. We actually want to see the gritty reality.
Absolutely, because these performers, you see it with these great performers, with comedians, it's all showbiz, and you're like, wow, they've got the best life ever. No, they haven't. They've got all the issues that go with that.
Do you know what I was going to bring in there? Because I'm going to be watching it tomorrow night. It's on this channel with John Cleese.
No, the Dinosaur Hour on...
Yes, and who's he interviewing?
Stephen Fry.
Stephen Fry, and he also is going to talk about his difficulties with addiction. I think people do want to hear about that.
Yeah, it's very relatable.
But 9 o'clock Sunday night, I know I'll be watching it. I think I've got rid of you for the night, haven't I? I've got rid of him, so
where
I'll
you
be
going,
watching-
Phil?
Oh, who cares? I'll be watching John Cleese.
Anyway, Aidan, it's FA Cup weekend. First round of the FA Cup. Any giant killing potential?
Well, we saw Sheppey United in action last night. They took a lead against Walsall. And the bloke on the radio, when I was listening, had to explain exactly where Sheppey was. It was on the north coast of Kent. I've actually been there. You actually get a bridge over, and if you catch the bridge and it's down, you have to wait for 45 minutes for it to go up, which is probably why the house prices there are not as probably high as they should be. But no, look, it's an interesting weekend, but you see some real minnows in there that you haven't seen in a long, long time. You probably won't see again.
Right, the story I was interested in, because Phil and I were having a discussion about this more, is Marcus Rashford. And he's apologised now to his manager for going out and partying because they'd lost the derby, Man City, Man United lost. But he went partying afterwards. Phil and I thought that if he'd been partying beforehand and that meant they'd lost the game, we got that everybody was upset and, he'd be apologising to manager. But he partied afterwards, so what's the problem?
And it was his birthday.
Yeah.
It was a birthday.
You've got to read the room, surely. I mean, like, you're playing for Manchester United, you're earning an absolute fortune, right? You've got everything. You've got the adulation, you've got the wealth, you've got the appreciation of all your supporters when things are going well. But you also have to accept that when things go wrong, your fans don't want to see you out and about enjoying yourself when they're having a miserable time, having been absolutely pulverised by Manchester City, their nearest rivals.
If you have a bad day at work, you can't go out for...
But it's not a normal job. It's not a normal job. As Martin O'Neill said to Robbie Savage many years ago when he played for Leicester, Robbie Savage said, why can't I have a holiday on Boxing Day? He goes, Robbie, my son, when you're a footballer, every day's a holiday. Anyway, I was at Old Trafford.
Because first of all, when I thought, he must have had the party before the game, hence he was so bad. No, it was afterwards.
I was at Old Trafford the other day on Wednesday evening, and they were absolutely atrocious, I have to say. And I've been to a few United games recently.
He's a QPR fan, so he knows what atrocious is.
So is the manager on the line? Is this manager then? Is days numbered?
They're playing down the road from here this afternoon at 12:30 at Fulham. If they lose that, I think he'll be in serious trouble. They've lost their last two games 3-0. The signings are not coming up. They're coming off for them. They spent an absolute fortune. They spent £1 billion since Sir Alex Ferguson left. Sir Alex Ferguson said to me years ago, he said, the most successful trick I ever mastered was how to make a millionaire sweat. And I'm not convinced that the current crop of managers, or certainly not the one at Manchester United, is doing that for his players, because Newcastle went there the other day with 6 fullbacks and 7 players who played under Steve Bruce, and they wiped the floor with them.
I want to know the top shows of all time, the top TV shows of all time.
OK, you're going to love this list. Well, I've got to say, I don't know where Top of the Pops is or Gavin and Stacey. That's just my personal opinion. But
Phil's pulling a face
the greatest 100 TV shows ever made revealed. Number 1, who do you think it is?
Only Fools and Horses?
Yes.
Yeah, we covered it this morning. Sorry.
We'll play along, Aidan.
Right,
Let me play along.
Number
2, Line of Beauty.
Sorry.
Number 3, Happy Valley. Number 4, Downton Abbey. Number 5, my favourite, Fawlty Towers.
What number 5?
Dad's Army, is that?
Dad's Army. That's number 9.
Match of the Day?
It's not there.
No, not since Gary Lineker took over. The Carry On films, they're my favourite things on the
But
television.
you can't beat Fawlty Towers. You can't beat Only Fools and Horses.
Only 12
they are those
episodes.
absolute classics.
They only made 12 episodes, you know.
Yeah, but you just watch them again when you're having a rubbish day and they're brilliant.
Right, so people have voted for these. They think these are the best TV shows of all time. I mean, half of these shows couldn't be made now
you're right.
with the new woke world. What we find funny, what we don't find funny. Could you have a Spanish waiter you were taking the mickey out of? No, you couldn't. All of these things you couldn't have, and yet they are still viewed as the best TV shows of all time. What are we doing?
In-Betweeners was out in 2008. It's not even that long ago. There's no way that would be commissioned now.
But I'm a Celebrity's not there, but I've got to say I'm delighted that Nigel Farage, GB News is Nigel Farage, might be going on there. Do we know any inside scoop?
No,
I think he's going in.
We're relying on you for that.
Exactly.
Oh, I'll find out.
We'll argue afterwards about the best TV shows. That's it from us. It's been quite a fun show, hasn't it?
It has. It's been a pacey, it's been a punchy show. We've had lots of debates, lots of viewers' comments. Thank you, Aidan. Thank you, Hayley. It has been a good show. Coming up next, who have we got? The wonderful Dawn Neeson. And she's got a fun-packed show as well, so don't go anywhere.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a grim start out there for quite a few of us. Mostly a fine day for Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's England and Wales, seen the rain move in through the night, edging into Northern England and North Wales now, where it'll linger into the afternoon, followed by heavy blustery showers across the south. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place across parts of the south and potential for further flooding because the ground is saturated. As I said, most of Scotland and Northern Ireland dry and bright, 9 or 10, 11 here, maybe into the teens in the south, but stuck under this rainy zone over Northern England and North Wales. Going to feel pretty chilly at 7 or 8 Celsius at best. That rain will continue to edge northwards as we go through this evening. More heavy showers to come across the southeast and the far southwest. So again, the potential for further disruption. It turns largely dry and fine across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some clearer skies here will allow again some pockets of frost, just a hint of blue on the chart. Generally a chillier night across the south compared to the night just gone. Sunday, still pretty mixed. We're going to start with cloud and some outbreaks of rain across eastern England. I'm hopeful that will peter out through the day and we'll see something a bit brighter by the afternoon. There'll be sunny spells in many places, but there will still be showers feeding in across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England and Wales. Temperatures again on the cool side, certainly a chilly start by the afternoon, 9 to maybe 14 in the south.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle